Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you are in the stream. Fury in the streets over femicide in Mexico. Protesters are asking what needs to happen for the government to take the issue seriously. We want you to share your thoughts on how to address violence against women. You can let us know in our live YouTube chat.
Hi, I am Gisela Perez de Acha from Mexico, a lawyer and journalist, and you are in the stream.
In Mexico, women are taking part in the country's first all-women's labour strike. It's called A Day Without Us. No women at work, school or in public. These are some of the hashtags that are currently driving the conversation. The event was created in response to recent acts of gender-based violence that have dominated Mexican headlines this year. Public outrage was reignited after the February murders of Ingrid Escamilla, a 25-year-old woman allegedly mutilated by her partner, and a 7-year-old schoolgirl called Fatima, whose tortured corpse was found in a plastic bag. Listen to what Estrella Nunez, an activist in Mexico City, had to say about being a woman in Mexico.
Being a woman in Mexico is an act of resistance. It's an act of rebellion because I'm the one that has to demand that I'm not murdered. For what? To be able to reach my goals, to achieve my purpose? How can we stop the normalization of this violence? By stopping our friends who make chauvinist jokes. With some empathy and a bit of solidarity, we can. Today is the start of a revolution.
With us to talk about this in Mexico City, Alejandra Sosa, a lawyer and protester taking part in today's women's strike. In Monterrey, Mexico, Maria Santos Villarreal, a lawyer and protest organizer. And in Mexico City, Al Jazeera correspondent John Holman. We also reached out to the Mexican government and the National Institute for Women to join this discussion. And after some back and forth, they told us that nobody was available. But good to have you with us, guests Alejandra, Maria and John. Maria, I'm going to start with some protest pictures that you sent us. Thank you very much. I'm just wondering how much we're tapping into your mood. This one, so poignant here. Stop murdering and raping us. Another one here. May patriarchy fear feminism. If you could describe your mood right now, how would you describe your mood?
Thank you for having me. What I'd say is that the mood that we all shared yesterday in the march, and we've been sharing for quite some years now, it's a combination of anger and impotence because of what's happening in the country. We've been having 10 or 11 femicides a day. Women are raped, 40,000 rapes we have each year. We have 600,000 other sexual crimes a day. So the problem is very evident. It's an actual pandemic, the violence against women. So I wanted to express that in a short phrase, short catchphrase. And I am inspired in Mona Elzaoui. I don't know if that's correctly pronounced. When she says that may patriarchy fear feminism. So I just adequated it and translated it, and that's the phrase I used yesterday.
Okay, let me just bring in Alejandra. Alejandra, this idea of a day without us. What did you do today? What were other women doing today?
Well, at the workplace, we put out a little demonstration. We started putting up signs with some data about gender violence. As Maria says, the problem is really evident. So we at the workplace wanted to make sure that even though we were not at the workplace, the men there were able to see how big of the problem, how big the problem is. And I personally stay at home today.
On strike, though. on strike.
Yeah,
Let me share this. John, I love your Twitter feed. It gives me a little idea of what's been going on in Mexico today. So John says some metro stations this morning seem to be at a bit of a standstill without the women ticket machine operators. Now, how do we use those machines again? So here you can see like the men are just wandering around like, what are we supposed to be doing? What else have you seen, John? How effective is this strike with women staying at home?
I suppose we're in a bit of a Mexico City bubble. I think it's Maria that's in Monterrey, but it seems something pretty historic here. I mean, just this park that I'm in now, this would usually be full of people. It's not completely deserted. You can see some men actually walking past here, but it's almost empty. The city's main avenue, Reforma, is so much more subdued. We shared the metro. Actually, the metro actually has its own carriages for women in Mexico City, and that's because there's been so many incidents of groping and harassment. And what we've been told is, especially this morning in rush hour, those carriages were going out almost empty. So this is something, I don't think all women are striking. There's a lot of women in the informal sector here or from the working class that possibly don't have the means to do this, but I think there's so many women here that aren't going out on the streets, that aren't going to their workplace, and that even in their homes are saying, no, this has to be a day without women, so that everyone understands the gravity of this. It's as if we disappeared, as if these femicides have been killing us. My own wife, actually, I'm here keeping a sort of eye on my son. Because she's also on strike at the moment in the home, saying, no, we have to be as if we disappear. So this is a huge impact, I think, in the city and nationwide. It's something I've never seen in Mexico.
Alejandra, to give people an idea of what it is like to live in Mexico as a woman, one of the things you've done is it's almost like a misogyny meter or a misogyny chart. So you take things that maybe politicians or the media have said and you score it for how bad in terms of misogynistic an idea that is. Can you give us an example of that?
I don't know what you mean. Can you rephrase the question?
Yes, you do a misogyny meter. You keep track of misogyny. Can you explain why you're doing that? Give us an example.
I am not the activist that is currently doing that, but there are certain activists that do measurements of how misogynistic are the sayings of some politicians and some educational authorities.
I just want to go to yesterday, which there were so many protests across Mexico, and this is one protester explaining why she's out there on the streets. Let's have a look. It was International Women's Day.
Where is Monica Yanet? Where is Julia Ramos? Where are all of those young women that came from the outer neighborhoods, whose bodies were found? This is the justice that the state is giving us? No one trusts them. No one trusts the organizations of civil society, because in this city, girls and women keep disappearing and being murdered.
John, I'm just going back.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'm just going back to John. So some startling headlines, which even in a country that is used to seeing terrible things happen to women, really leapt out at people. So, as I mentioned earlier, there was the murder of a young woman, and her innards, her guts, were found in the sewer. And then you cannot but be moved and just terrified by a little kid, a little 7-year-old girl who was also murdered. How bad is it now in Mexico? Are we reaching the tipping point where the government has to do something?
Well, I think just hearing that woman that you just played the clip from, it just sends goosebumps down you. And when I and of course Alejandra and Maria, we've been looking at this thing for years in the country, and the crimes that you mentioned to 7-year-old Fatima, to Ingrid, those are things that we've been seeing for years across Mexico. So this does feel like the first time perhaps where there's been this huge surge of women. You just saw in the protest that was going through the city's main avenues yesterday, it was just a sea of Purple, women coming out to say, really, enough is enough, and even the strike here. So you hope it's some sort of tipping point. I was speaking to a couple of women earlier on today that we've been interviewing as we go on the day, and they've been saying maybe this isn't going to change all of a sudden, but at least the younger generation, maybe they'll start to learn that there's a different way to treat women, to refer to women, and to act towards women in this country. Now, you mentioned the government there. Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador is Mexico's president, and I think a lot of women that I've been talking to anyway, and Alejandra Maria can speak to this more than I, have been surprised by his reaction. He's suggested at points, even today actually, the day after that huge march, that there were conservative interests behind this march. In the times past, he's called that a black hand behind this movement. He's also said that the cause of all these femicides, or part of the cause, could be neoliberal ideology in the country, that needs to be changed. And he hasn't so far come up with a really tangible plan to tackle this, to tackle the femicides in the country. And no one's suggesting that it started under his watch. This is something that's been going on in Mexico for years now. But it is surprising to many, and I think disappointing. And I'd like to Alejandra Maria to speak more to this, of his reaction to it.
Yeah, about what you were asking before of the 1 to 5 scale, it was me. Here in Monterrey, we have a group of women that's called Mujeres Más Mujeres, and what we do is to, well, among other things, we like to score some public discourses of many governance. We score from 1 to 5. We call it machitos. You get one machito if you say something that invisibilizes the women's fight, and you get 3 machitos if you humiliate women. You get 5 machitos if you publicly say that women deserve to get raped. So we have a scale in which we have scored the public statements of our governor, of the president, many legislators. So that's a way of us to, a way we have to visibilize the problem of machismo in the public discourse. And about what John was saying, I personally am disappointed of the president because I voted for him. And I see that he's more interested in not making conservatives angry than attending our demands. And he has, in fact, called us feminists, that we have conservative interests, and that's why we're marching and protesting, which is absolutely not true. I think that being a feminist and being a conservative just doesn't go with it's a contradiction. So I would like the president to hear us, to invite us in the designing of public policy, to hear other women in his government, he has very capable women in his government. Maybe hear them more so that we can eradicate this pandemic, which is violence against women.
So let me just bring in just a little bite from President Lopez Obrador so that our general audience can hear what he thinks about this idea of gender-based violence in Mexico. So this was February the 17th. Let's have a listen.
Mexican society has fallen into decline, a progressive degradation that has to do with the neoliberal model. This isn't solved just with police or with prisons, or with threats of a heavy hand. We have to address the background here, that there be material well-being and well-being of the soul.
Alejandra, on our live YouTube chat, people are talking about the idea of impunity in Mexico. So here's Sumerian. He says, I am Mexican, and the real problem is the lack of justice, not only in the area of femicide, but here in Mexico, we have 90% of impunity in every single felony. Alejandra, go ahead.
Yes, I mean, I do completely agree. The issue, it's not only the impunity on femicides. For me, actually, it's the impunity of what happens before femicides. Because most of the times when a woman gets killed, that's not the first sign of violence that she suffered. Most of the time, she has been beaten before, she has been called names before, she has been sexually assaulted before. So the fact that these kind of crimes that it's not that they are less of important than a femicide, but the fact that these kind of crimes remain with impunity is what actually leads to a femicide. So I do completely agree. I am completely disappointed at the reaction of the president, as Mariana. And I think that he needs to put up on a comprehensive agenda to tackle gender violence, and it needs to start. It needs to start not only at tackling impunity against femicides, but also in regards of gender violence as a whole, because it's all part of a whole, and femicide is just the tipping point.
I'm wondering what is actually being done by the current government, the Institute for Women. Let's have a listen to this comment and bring it into the conversation. Here we go.
Due to the violence that in my country is currently, I decided to participate today in this strike because as a migrant Mexican woman, I cannot be indifferent faced to the wave of feminicides. The government has not been enabled to stop the murder of the woman. It's necessary the creation of the Ministry of the Woman, autonomous and independent, with her own voice. We have a determination to make stronger our claims. We want justice. We want to live in a different way.
So that was Rosa Maria. Rosa Maria is a Mexican based in France, and she has also been protesting in support of the women who were protesting in Mexico. These are some of the images of her protests. Mexicans in Paris, together we are stronger, not one more. Mexico, femicide. You know, you get the idea of where her energy is coming from. But John, just thinking back to the government and the authorities in Mexico, what are they doing? Because this is a movement that is growing and growing.
Yes, in regards of that,
I think the calls on the government is to at least have a specialized... No, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think that in regards of that, the Mexico City authorities have taken upon policies related to safety of women in the public transportation. So, as John said earlier, we have special cars in the metro stations for women. We have special cars in the Metrobús for women. We have that kind of stuff, but it hasn't been quite enough. So the woman that was speaking earlier, she was speaking about having a Mexican women ministry. We do have one of those in Mexico City, and in Mexico City, the Mexico City government, she has held meetings with women and with feminists in order to listen to what they are looking for in regards of feminist policy, gender policies, and that's kind of the things that they have been doing, but unfortunately, it hasn't been enough yet.
John, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I suppose a question for Alejandra and for Maria as well. I mean, Mexico City with all sorts of things. And just as you, I think it was Alejandra there speaking, just as you said there, in Mexico City, there seems to be more happening. When you go to the area just outside that's called the State of Mexico, El Estado de Mexico, you see over years there's been a lot of femicides, and you've seen a state government that's really been reluctant to act over many years, and that a lot of activists say at the federal level has happened as well. There was talk of a special area in the attorney's office being set up to try and deal with this. President Lopez Obrador seemed to sort of indicate this morning that he didn't think that was necessary. But it seems like I was speaking to Maria de la Luz Estrada, who's a very prominent sort of activist for women's rights in the country and has been for some time. And she said that even though sometimes things look great on paper, the laws we have, the kind of protocols to deal with these sorts of things, with violence towards women, in the practice there's a lack of sort of will to follow those through, or a lack of resources or manpower, or just the police really being reluctant to do it. And she says that that's a generalised problem. I was speaking to her on the phone the other day. It's certainly what we've seen in our reporting across years in Mexico. So I suppose to you guys, to Maria and Alejandra, do you see that outside of sort of Mexico City? How do you see the willpower, I suppose, of the Mexican authorities to act on this?
Maria, you go first.
Yeah, that's a generalized problem in all the country, in every city. We have impunity. We have the problem that we have good or relatively good laws, but they are not executed the way they should be. We have, in fact, governors, mayors, presidents that reproduce gender-based violence. So even if the people who are ruling us don't apply the law the way it should be, what do we expect of other men? So A Day Without Women is a reflective exercise of what would happen if one day, overnight, we all disappeared. And it's a reflective exercise, but the risk is very real. We are, in fact, disappearing every day, 10 by 10. So is the government gonna listen to us now? Or is it gonna keep doing what it's always been doing? Every March 8th, saying a very cute statement about, oh, we love women, but we don't do anything about it. We don't do anything about the fact that you are being raped, that you are being murdered. And we don't make any gender perspective policies.
Let me just bring, Maria, let me just bring in Alejandra, because Alejandra, just by looking at her face, your face looks hopeless, but I know that you are hopeful because you are a protester and you are trying to make change happen. Alejandra.
Yes, it's just as Maria said, the risk is very real. Actually, 2 days ago, one girl, her name was Nadia Veronica Rodriguez Saro Martinez. As part of her protest, she posted on Facebook a missing person advert with her face, kind of mimicking what will happen if she went missing. And yesterday, she was found murdered by a man. So yeah, the risk is very real. So that's why I have this hopeless face. I used to know her.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
We were looking also, one of the things that we asked...
Well, Alejandra, a question
Go ahead, John.
for you. I suppose a question for Alejandra and Maria. What should the Mexican government be doing? What do you hope to see after these 2 days of enormous action?
Openness. We hope to see, or at least I'll speak for me. All the feminists don't look the exact same thing, but I would expect openness from the government. I would expect to eradicate completely the machismo in their public discourse and in their actions. I would expect to build a plan with feminists, with experts, with people in his government, women in his government who are very capable, and build together a plan of action to eradicate violence against women that goes into the institutional sector, but also in the cultural aspect of the problem, which is very important to re-educate people and re-educate society about how important this fight is. And even though we seem like very far away to achieve equality, every day with our actions and every day with our protests, and with these kind of programs that you are having, we are making conscience, and one person a day, we are beginning to address the problem.
Alejandra.
Yes. Also, I think that, as Maria, I completely agree. We need more openness from the president. We need him to stop calling us conservatives, because that's not the case. Actually, a feminist is completely the opposite. We are progressive people. And we need to see not only the gender discourse being put into a discourse, because while it is true that half of the cabinet is women, we haven't seen this completely translated into policies. We are not seeing any budgetary decisions being taken in regards of women's safety. Actually, it has been kind of the opposite. Last year, the budget for women refugees got split, and they cut off the budget for that. So
yeah.
that's actually the opposite of tackling gender violence.
So you want actually the government and the policymakers to turn it into actual policy and put funding into it. Let me just give you one thought here from Keith, who is watching our show on Twitter. He says, "Hear all women. Make the reporting of violence against women a process where women are heard, trusted, supported and protected, and provide all necessary services confidentially as well." Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, John Holman. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time on The Stream.